So then, is sugar an addiction?
100%. I mean, it's not so much the sugar, it's the perfect I don't stick my face into a bowl of sugar and snort it up. That does nothing for me at all, I have to say. It is that perfect combination of fat and sugar. It's actually a kind of ratio. There's the magical ratio of 2 to 1, of basically 2 units of carbs to 1 of fat, which you find in almost every addictive food.
I did not know that.
And do you know why we find that so attractive?
Why?
And I was utterly gobsmacked when I first came across this research. It started with Roy Taylor and the diabetes research. Then I spoke to Professor Susan Jebb, who's one of the leading experts in Oxford University on weight loss, and she said to me, look, we know that the amount of weight you lose in the first 4 weeks predicts weight loss at 6 months, a year, 2 years and 5 years. That actually rapid weight loss is motivating. She set out to do a big trial to demonstrate that rapid weight loss was a terrible idea, and ended up proving the exact opposite. And she published about 6 months ago. And so she said, look, it's incredibly motivating. It's not suitable for everyone, but what we do see is if you do it properly, you do it safely, you do it carefully, then it is much, much more likely to succeed than slow and steady. And there's a big study about to come out in Australia, I'm aware of, which will say exactly the same thing. And again, the researcher I spoke to said she set out to prove the opposite 4 years ago, and she was so impressed by the results, she put herself on a rapid weight loss diet and lost about 20 kilos.
Wow.
So there is a consistent body of evidence which points that way. The reason why rapid weight loss diets got such a bad rap was because there were a lot of dodgy ones in the 70s where there was very poor quality protein. And you need to eat decent amounts of protein, and that's probably 50 to 60 grams a day. You don't use protein as fuel, you use it to basically build new cells. So the Mediterranean diet is the best studied diet on the planet. It has been subject to so many trials. And what it has in it is essentially, fruit and veggies, which is what you expect, decent amounts of oily fish. Oily fish is very good for the brain, lots of olive oil, splash on things. It also has a lot of nuts, because nuts turn out to be rather good for you. In the trials, they were allowed to drink a glass or two of red wine, not every evening.
That.
We like that, and also some dark chocolate. So this is kind of quite high fat, quite low carb, but not keto, not crazy low, and not crazy high other. And on that, in the trials, what they found is that it significantly cut your risk of heart disease, of developing diabetes. Women, it cut their risk of breast cancer. And in a big study done in Melbourne, they found that people who were moderately, severely depressed, when they were put on a Mediterranean diet, around a third of them basically were able to come off medication, and they did astonishingly well. So there's some great research being done in Australia on this topic.
That's amazing. I feel like we're overlooking some lifestyle factors. What kind of role does stress, sleeplessness and mental health have in our overall health?
An awful lot. I mean, we know that, if you have a bad night's sleep, next day you wake up, and on average people eat 300 calories more than they would normally.
When they're tired?
When they're tired, they eat biscuits. What they really want is cake and biscuits to make themselves feel better. And that is very well documented. When I wake up after a terrible piece of jet lag, that's what I want to eat. I don't, because I know I need to eat nuts, but that's what I want to eat. And we know that when you're stressed, that's what you want. You want the sugar high. You basically want to eat something which is going to go, whoa, and make you feel better about yourself. And then the trouble is you feel really, really awful about yourself, and so you have another biscuit. Strange enough, that does not help. So there is a section in the book about mindfulness, about different ways of dealing with stress, emotional eating and things like that, because it is a huge part of it. And that's why I would urge you to join a community. That's why we have these websites, because you need support. You need someone you can turn to when you're feeling dreadful, when you're feeling bad about yourself, and they can say, look, I've been there, I've done that, I know exactly what it's like. You might get support from your friends, you might get support from your spouse. The people who fail, and my son, who's a doctor, actually did his dissertation looking on who succeeds and who fails doing this diet. And the ones who fail are the ones where the spouse sabotages it. There are spouses who do not want their spouse to lose weight, so they deliberately set out to sabotage it. And it's true. I mean, it's quite depressing, but it happens.
That makes me really sad.
It makes me very...
It is my husband that is the one that always says, let's get ice cream.
Yeah. And I hope you get no!
So why is it some people seem to have willpower and others don't?
It seems to be an illusion, the thing about willpower. So the thing we know is, for example, some people are not attracted to chocolate. My wife couldn't give a damn about chocolate, so she had a small square, she doesn't care anymore. She feels no compulsion to eat it. The thing that people really do who appear to exercise willpower is they plan their lives in such a way that they avoid temptation. So, for example, if you don't want to have eating chocolate and crisps and things like that, get out of the house. Then you won't see it, because when I see it, I want it. If I don't see it, I don't have the same crazy things. Equally, if you're going to go out and do a run, then put your sort of shoes by the door. Have visual cues, things which basically say to you, hey, I have a dog. The dog barks and tells me she wants to go for a run. She knows 7 o'clock every morning we go for a run. She yelps, and that's kind of my cue to kind of at least go for a jog, if something else.
Okay, so we know that being overweight is not great. Then why is it that we are unable to control our desire for food that we know is bad for us?
Because the food manufacturers have worked it out like that. They have worked out what our weaknesses are. It's exactly like the smoking industry. The tobacco industry worked out pretty early on how to get people hooked. They knew nicotine was addictive, and that's what they flogged. And that's what the food industry is doing. It is producing these hyper-palatable foods, foods that we just cannot say no to. When I start on a bar of chocolate, I do not stop. I know it is bad for me. I know it's going to make me fat, spotty, diabetic, but I cannot eat 1 square of chocolate. My wife can do that. I eat 1 square, 2 squares, 3 squares, and then unless I stick it in the bin, I will go on to the bitter end.
So then is sugar an addiction?
100%. I mean, it's not so much the sugar, it's the perfect I don't stick my face into a bowl of sugar and snort it up. That does nothing for me at all, I have to say. It is that perfect combination of fat and sugar. It's actually a kind of ratio. There's the magical ratio of 2 to 1, of basically 2 units of carbs to 1 of fat, which you find in almost every addictive food. And do you know why we find that so attractive?
Why?
Because it is in the first food we ever ate. Basically breast milk. That's where you find that ratio. And what the food manufacturers have brilliantly realized is if they replicate it from everything from crisps through chocolate, through pizza, you name it, it all obeys that 2 to 1 ratio.
Wow, I did not know that. That's amazing.
It is.